How much have you spent on garden fertilizer in the last 5 years? If you're anything like me, it adds up fast. $40 to $60 every spring for a bag of 10-10-10. Another $30 for the tomato-specific formula. Maybe 20 more for June. That's $90 to $110 per season. Times 5 years? You're looking at $450 to $550. I did that for 18 years. 18 years of buying the same branded bags, trusting the labels, trusting the science on the back. And every August, my plants would hit a wall. Early blight on the tomatoes, aphids on the beans, weak stems that couldn't hold fruit. I blamed everything except the fertilizer itself. Then 3 summers ago, I visited a market garden in Geauga County, Ohio. Old Order Amish. They were harvesting bushel after bushel of perfect vegetables from a plot smaller than my backyard. The answer stopped me cold. None. Zero. They build their soil using a system they call the 4-quarter rotation. It eliminates the need to buy any input, ever, and I'm going to walk you through exactly how it works, using materials you probably already have sitting in your yard right now. I'll be honest with you. I've been gardening since I was in my late 20s. That's over 30 years now. For the first 25 years, I thought I understood soil fertility. I read the bulletins. I followed the NPK ratios on the bags. Then I drove out to Route 87 near Burton in Geauga County on a Saturday morning in June. There's a roadside stand there run by an Old Order Amish family. What I saw didn't make sense to me at first. Their garden was maybe 1,200 square feet. 4 distinct sections separated by permanent rows of flowering herbs and low shrubs. No bags of fertilizer stacked anywhere. No drip irrigation. No plastic mulch, just incredibly healthy plants absolutely loaded with fruit and vegetables. When I asked the gardener what he fed his soil, he looked at me like I'd asked a strange question. He said they don't feed the soil anything they have to buy. They build it. And that's when it clicked. I had been thinking about garden problems completely backward. I was always fighting pests, fighting weeds, fighting nutrient deficiency. Geauga County gardeners don't fight anything. They build a system where those problems can't establish in the first place. That shift in thinking changed everything for me. The system starts with dividing your growing space into 4 equal quarters. I'm talking about physical quarters, not conceptual zones, not areas you eyeball, but measured sections with permanent markers. In Geauga County, they use cedar stakes at the corners and run twine between them at ground level. The typical plot they work with is 20 feet by 20 feet. That gives you 4 10 by 10 squares. Each quarter holds 1 plant family. The families rotate clockwise every spring. Between the quarters, they maintain 18-inch wide corridors of perennial herbs. These stay put while everything else moves. The herbs they use are yarrow, dill, cilantro allowed to bolt, and sweet alyssum. Those 4 plants flower at staggered times from May through September. University of Vermont research found that plots with continuous flowering corridors maintained parasitic wasp populations at 6 times the density of conventional gardens. Those wasps parasitize aphids, tomato hornworms, and cabbage loopers before you ever see damage. For zones 3 through 5, you'll want to mulch those herb corridors with 4 inches of straw in November to protect the root systems through hard freezes. For zones 7 through 9, the corridors need partial shade cloth from June through August, or the herbs will bolt too early and stop flowering by July. I set mine up in 2019. By the second season, I stopped seeing hornworms entirely. Not reduced numbers, eliminated. But here's where it gets interesting. The quarters aren't just about organization. They're about breaking pathogen cycles that soil-borne diseases rely on. Step 2 is assigning the plant families to their starting quarters and understanding why the sequence matters. Quarter 1 takes the nightshade family, tomatoes, peppers, eggplant. Quarter 2 takes the brassica family, cabbage, broccoli, kale, cauliflower. Quarter 3 takes the legume family, beans and peas. Quarter 4 takes the heavy feeders, squash, cucumbers, melons, corn. The Geauga County gardeners I watched had been running this exact sequence for 23 years. Same families, same rotation direction, same corridors. The logic is biochemical. Nightshades are moderate feeders that establish early, Brassicas follow them because they need the moderate fertility, and their root exudates suppress nightshade pathogens left in the soil. Ohio State University soil science research identified specific glucosinolate compounds that brassica roots secrete. These compounds inhibit verticillium wilt and bacterial spot, the two diseases that collapse tomato plants in August. Legumes come third because they fix atmospheric nitrogen through rhizobium bacteria in their root nodules. They're rebuilding what the first two families extracted. Squash and melons finish the rotation because they're the heaviest feeders and need that legume-charged soil. Each family gets exactly 10 weeks in their quarter before frost date in zones 5 and 6. For zones 3 through 5, you compress the sequence by starting transplants indoors 4 weeks earlier and using row covers until June 1st. For zones 7 through 9, you extend it by succession, planting a second round of nightshades in August for a fall harvest. I measured my tomato yields the first year I followed this: 47 pounds per plant from Brandywine heirlooms with 0 fertilizer inputs. Store-bought tomatoes had never given me more than 19 pounds per plant, even with weekly Miracle-Gro drenches. The third step is executing the clockwise rotation every spring and understanding what you're actually preventing. On April 15th in Zone 6, adjust 2 weeks later for Zone 5, 3 weeks earlier for Zone 8, you move every family 1 quarter clockwise. Nightshades that were in Quarter 1 move to Quarter 2. Brassicas move from Quarter 2 to Quarter 3. Legumes move from Quarter 3 to Quarter 4. Heavy feeders move from Quarter 4 to Quarter 1. The herb corridors stay exactly where they are. What makes this work is timing. Soil-borne pathogens have life cycles. Verticillium, wilt, microsclerotia, the dormant structures that survive winter, can persist in soil for 7 years if the same host family keeps getting planted in that spot. But they need a living host within 12 months to maintain their population density. When you rotate annually, those pathogen populations crash by 94%, according to UC Davis plant pathology research. The 4-family system means each plot location sees the same family only once every 4 years. That's long enough to starve out every common garden disease except clubroot, which requires 7-year rotations. The Geauga County gardeners mark their rotation with a simple system. They use 4 colored stakes: red for nightshades, green for brassicas, blue for legumes, yellow for heavy feeders. Each spring they physically move the stakes clockwise. No notebook needed, no charts to reference. The stakes tell you where everything goes. For zones 3 and 4, where the season is compressed, they start the rotation on May 1st instead of mid-April. For zones 8 and 9, where you can run 2 full cycles, they do a midsummer rotation in July and a second one in February. I rotated my quarters for the first time in 2020. That was the year I finally understood why my previous gardens had failed despite following all the conventional advice. I wasn't working with biology. I was just moving plants around randomly and hoping for different results. The 4th step is feeding the system between rotations, and this is the piece that eliminates fertilizer purchases permanently. 2 weeks before you rotate each spring, you sheet mulch every quarter with a specific layering sequence. First layer is 1 inch of compost. This can be homemade or purchased, doesn't matter, you're only using it as an inoculant. Second layer is 3 inches of chopped leaves from the previous fall. Third layer is 2 inches of grass clippings, fresh, not dried, still green. Fourth layer is 1 inch of wood ash from your stove or fire pit. That's it. 7 inches total. You do not till it in. You do not mix it. You lay it on the surface and let soil biology incorporate it over the next 8 weeks. The carbon-to-nitrogen ratio of that mix is roughly 30:1, which is the exact ratio that thermophilic bacteria need to reach their peak decomposition temperature of 140 degrees Fahrenheit. At that temperature, weed seeds are sterilized, but beneficial bacteria and fungi survive. UC Davis soil ecology research measured microbial biomass in sheet-mulched plots versus tilled plots. The sheet mulch systems maintained fungal populations at 4 times the density and bacterial diversity at double the species count. Those microbes are converting the raw materials into plant-available nutrients without you doing anything except layering correctly. For zones 3 through 5, you'll want to add an extra inch of leaves to compensate for slower decomposition rates in cold spring soils. For zones 7 through 9, reduce the grass clipping layer to 1 inch, or you'll get anaerobic decomposition and sulfur smell. The wood ash is critical. It provides potassium, calcium, and raises pH slightly, which brassicas and nightshades both prefer. I calculated my material costs the first year I sheet mulched. Leaves were free from municipal collection sites. Grass clippings came from my own lawn. Ash came from my wood stove. The only purchase was 1 cubic yard of compost at $38. That fed 400 square feet for an entire season. The same space would have required $280 in bagged fertilizer using the conventional feeding schedule printed on the Miracle-Gro label. Here's something I wish I'd figured out sooner. For years I was planting hybrid tomatoes, Celebrity, Better Boy, Big Beef, and every August they collapsed without fail. The first year I switched to open-pollinated varieties from the Geauga County gardeners, Brandywine, Cherokee Purple, Mortgage Lifter. Those plants stayed green into October. Same soil, same weather, same watering. Seed source matters more than most people realize. Subscribe to Garden Wisdom Vault if you want to keep following this. What I'm showing you next takes the rotation system and adds one element that doubles production without adding a single square foot of space. Now, before we close this out, I want to give you one more technique I learned from those Geauga County market gardeners. It takes 3 minutes per plant, costs you nothing, and I've doubled my tomato yield with it every single year since I started using it. It's called the tomato lean. When your tomato plants hit 4 feet tall, usually early July, you pinch out the terminal growth at the very top. That stops vertical growth. Then you take the top 2 lateral branches and train them horizontally along whatever support you're already using. Twine, wire, old baling twine. Doesn't matter. You're just bending those top 2 shoots sideways instead of letting them grow straight up. What happens is this. Instead of 1 vertical stem producing fruit, you now have 2 horizontal branches fruiting along their entire length. You've doubled your fruit-bearing surface area in the exact same footprint, same water, same nutrients, same space, twice the tomatoes. I timed myself last season. 2 minutes, 40 seconds per plant, and I pulled an extra 18 pounds per plant compared to the vertical-only controls I ran. That's it. No products, no chemicals, no purchased materials, just your hands and whatever support system you already have in place. I want to hear from you in the comments. What's the one thing you've been buying every spring that you're going to eliminate this season? Seeds? Fertilizer? Pest spray? Tell me below. I read every single one. And if this approach makes sense to you, if you're tired of fighting your garden and ready to build a system instead, subscribe to Garden Wisdom Vault. I visit Amish communities across Ohio and Pennsylvania documenting techniques like this. Methods that worked in 1870 still work today and will work long after the garden centers run out of whatever miracle product they're selling next year. Here's what I realized standing in that Geauga County garden 3 years ago. The gardeners at the big box stores are selling you solutions to problems. The Amish are teaching you to build ground where those problems can't survive in the first place. One approach keeps you dependent, the other sets you free. That principle doesn't need a name. You can see it working the moment you walk into that garden. Your great-grandparents knew this. They didn't have a garden center down the road. They had observation, patience, and systems that close their own loops. That knowledge isn't lost. It's still growing in places like Route 87. You just have to know where to look.